Call on Government Order of the Day number 2.
Child Support Amendment Bill, third reading.
Honourable Peter Dunn.
Mr Speaker, I move with a great deal of pleasure that the Child Support Amendment Bill be now read a third time. The measures that are proposed in this bill bring our child support scheme up to date and make it much fairer for the 210,000 children and families that are involved in the scheme. Since the current child support arrangements were introduced in 1992, child support has been a backstop for families when separated parents are unable to reach agreement over the financial support of their children. But times have changed since 1992, and the purpose of this bill is to update the scheme so that it better reflects the social changes that have occurred in parenting and workforce participation over the past 20 years. And that includes a new child support calculation formula that recognises the different circumstances of parents today and the latest research available on how much it costs to raise a child, and improvements to the payment, penalty and debt rules to reduce the risk of parents dropping out of the system because they are simply overwhelmed by the growing burden of debt. They are the main features of the bill. But its underlying principles are simple: that child support payments are fairly calculated and collected for the benefit of the children they are intended for, and that parents continue to take financial responsibility for their children when a relationship breaks down. And I feel particularly strongly about that latter point. About 40% of the correspondence that I receive as Minister relates to child support. And I am shocked at the number of parents who want to deny any responsibility for their children because the relationship may have been a long time ago. The majority of parents fully understand their responsibilities, and they do attempt to adhere to them, and that's good. But there are those, unfortunately, who seem to think this is the most ultimate case of out of sight, out of mind. I'm grateful to those good, loyal, hard-working parents who want to see a fair system, and for the many others who took the opportunity through the extensive consultation process associated with the development of this bill for their input. I'm also grateful for the efforts of officials across several agencies who collaborated on the policy development work and the legal drafters who worked on the detail of this legislation. Mr Speaker, this has been a long journey. It began in 2008 during the term of the previous government. It saw a discussion paper issued around the time that the government changed. It saw the legislation that arose from that discussion process introduced in, I think, 2009 from memory, the Select Committee process that took place following that, and now its passage through the House. The first set of changes will take effect from April 2014, the second set a year later. We still have a long way to go, but as this bill now stands, we are a lot closer, I think, to achieving better, more equitable outcomes for the children and the parents that are involved in the child support scheme. I want to make this point, as I've made at every stage of this debate. Child support is not a default position. It is the backstop when things fail. The emphasis has to be on parents seeking to reach equitable and cooperative agreements amongst themselves. And we've got to stop this mentality of just simply leaving it all to child support, because that's where the divisions arise, that's where the tensions occur. And I want to see much greater emphasis placed on parents reaching their own mutually acceptable arrangements. And I know this was a point that came through very strongly during the Select Committee's consideration of the bill, and I thank them for their efforts, their consideration of the legislation and for the recommendations to change the bill in various areas that they proposed. Mr Speaker, child support is a vexed area. It is not one that you can ever legislate for every circumstance, because of the nature of the way in which families form and relationships occur. But what this legislation can at best do is provide a framework, and this is what I think we have achieved in this bill. There will always be those who will fit at the boundary or not fit, or who will feel that the system somehow is unfair in respect of their circumstances. Mr Speaker, there's not a great deal we can do about that, and the challenge that we face in looking at changes to the legislation, and it was a point that was highlighted by the opposition at several stages during the debate, is simply this. We have a system at the moment, under the current legislation, that in my view is unnecessarily inflexible. It imposes a very rigid formula that takes little account of individual circumstances. Now that's easy to run because you just simply draw the line and say this is the side of it that you fall if you feel aggrieved, tough. The criticism we faced during the development of this bill and at the Select Committee was that we were going to be introducing a more complicated system. Mr. Speaker, that is the trade-off for one that is more flexible, for one that takes greater account of individual circumstances, of individual stages of a child's life, and the formula that reflects payments accordingly. And I say to those who say that the system will now be more complex, and then they say you've got to get an accountant or a lawyer to work your way through it, that is absolute bunkum, you don't. But I say to people who run that line, you cannot then argue for a fairer, more responsive system without accepting that flexibility brings its own challenges. No one stands up for child support as it currently stands. It's difficult to administer. We have high levels of non-compliance. We have aggrieved parents on both sides of the argument. What this legislation does, by recognising the change in circumstances over the last 20 years, by increasing the formula for shared parenting arrangements, by also addressing, as I say, the application of the child support formula itself, is make a genuine attempt to recognise the circumstances of the parents who take advantage of that system. But I close on this point, Mr. Speaker. I am delighted at the end of what for me has been a 6-year journey on this bill to see it's going to pass tonight. I'm really delighted about that. But I want to send a message to all parents out there that in the situation of a relationship breaking down, your primary responsibility, whatever aggravation there might be or bitterness might surround the situation, your primary responsibility is to your children. And your primary responsibility, both of you, is to sit down and try and negotiate arrangements that provide for the effective care and maintenance of those children. And if that cannot be achieved, then child support is there to help you. But don't simply look at the system and say, that's the default, we just go there automatically and we both end up mutually unhappy. Because the long-term losers from that are very clear to identify. The kids. And the kids are the one group that don't choose their parents, they don't choose their circumstances, but they are influenced dramatically by them. So, Mr. Speaker, let's not kid ourselves that this legislation, or any legislation, is the ultimate answer. But this bill, recognising contemporary situations, is a vast improvement on the current Act. It's one that will be much fairer in many respects for more people. It's in tune with the mood of contemporary society. I think it's a good step forward, and I'm delighted that Parliament is going to give it its third reading this evening.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, there's a kid's story about a little engine